Greetings, everybody. I'm really, really overjoyed to welcome one of my favorite people on earth, Sebene Selassie. I still consider her my neighbor, even though I've been in Chicago for 3 years, almost 4 years. Southside Liberation Center is really honored to continue the BIPOC Wednesday sessions with various traditions, teachers from various traditions. Sebene Selassie is a Brooklyn-based Dharma teacher, writer, coach, and consultant. I'm just going to read her bio, even if you might have read it, but some might be joining without her reading it. She began studying Buddhism over 30 years ago and received a BA from McGill University in Religious and Women's Studies and an MA from the New School, where she focused on cultural studies and race. She's a former executive of New York Insight Meditation Center and has served on the boards of Barre Center for Buddhist Studies and Sacred Mountain Sangha. She's a teacher on the 10% Happier app. Her first book, You Belong, A Call for Connection, was published by HarperOne in August of 2020. And I implore you to get yourself a copy. It is so beautifully done. It's such a beautiful offering. I'm so proud of her. So, in the spirit of the Dharma is given in the spirit of sharing, and any dana or donations given this evening will be split with Southside Liberation Center and Sebene Selassie. So please practice the cultivating the generous heart if you can. You can send that to southsideliberation@gmail via PayPal. We haven't hooked up the Zelle or other accounts. We're just PayPal right now. So without further ado, very proud and honored to bring you Sebene Selassie. Thank you. Yay!
Thank you. Hey, Sankara.
He's gone.
Thank you, Joshua. It's so great to be here with you. For those of you who don't know, and maybe a couple of you might remember, Josh and I started a Sangha together. I think it was both of our first really meditation communities that we were leading. And we started in my living room, in the room next door to me, which is 2 blocks from Joshua's place where he used to live. And, he was saying before some of you came on that he still considers me a neighbor. I still think about you every time I walk by that building, even though it's been years. And so, yeah, I consider you a neighbor still and a brother always. And yeah, I'm just really, really honored to be here and so proud of you for starting anew in a new city and starting to cultivate a community. And yeah, really happy for all of you that you get to be part of it, for those of you based in Chicago. And welcome everyone from wherever you are. Yeah, so we'll spend the next 90 minutes or so together in conversation and practice. And I really want, Joshua chose a title for this evening, The Dharma of Belonging, which I love. I love that title. And I really wanted to just honor that, the fullness of what that's inviting. And to say, I'm not here to kind of give a Dharma talk in a traditional sense. I don't really have notes that I'm working from, but I really just want to speak from the heart. And that's really what belonging is about. I give a lot of formal talks, and I don't think that's what we need to do here together tonight. But just for me to really share from my experience, in particular right now, how I'm feeling today, and for each of you to show up how you're feeling today, and this moment that is very continues to be challenging. I was texting with a friend just a half an hour ago who's going through a very difficult divorce and custody battle. And, we were talking about this path being about finding some measure of ease and freedom and belonging and joy, even in the midst of challenges. And that's exactly what the Buddha was talking about. Whatever tradition you're coming from, really practices and offerings that help us navigate the fact that there is pain in life, and there are going to be difficulties. And this moment collectively is a very intense moment of difficulty, but that doesn't mean that we abandon our capacity for joy and for freedom. And when I talk about belonging, I'm really using it as a synonym for those things. Belonging to me really speaks to our capacity to know that right here, right now, in this body, in this moment, we can touch into that freedom. We can touch into that joy. So that's what I'd like to explore with you tonight. And I'll start with a few honorings or rememberings that I like to begin with every time I teach or gather. And then we'll do a practice. I'll lead a guided meditation. And if you're new to practice, don't worry, I'll give some instruction to help you settle in. And I'll also leave plenty of space and silence for those of you who want to practice in your own way. And then I'm going to share just a few thoughts about the nature of practice and practicing belonging, even in the midst of difficulties and challenge. And then I really want to have plenty of time for conversation. And it feels like a small enough group that we can really have a group conversation. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you, and really want to leave a lot of time for that. Okay. So I'll begin with these 3 honorings that help me remember this sense of belonging. So these are my offerings to you. They're, sometimes we do things and it makes it seem like this is how it should be done. I really just connect to these honorings as a way to ground myself, as a way to remember my true nature and the nature of interconnection. And so you can connect to these honorings in whatever way feels right to you. And if you'd like to take on a practice of beginning your practice with honorings, encourage you to experiment and play with that. But I find that having a way of honoring specific aspects of our world is really a part of ancient wisdom traditions, and it's such a beautiful part of practice. So I always begin now with honoring native land, which many more people are becoming familiar with in the US, and I imagine many of us are here in the so-called United States. And this is an invitation that is more common in Canada and New Zealand and Australia. It's an invitation to acknowledge that we're on settler colonial land, that we live in a settler colonial state, which means that the indigenous people were forcibly removed, genocided, that this is colonized land, and that most of where we are, especially if we're in the cities of New York and Chicago, which I recognize some of you as being here on this coast, and I know some of you are where Joshua is, that we're on unceded territory. And so honoring native land, doing these kinds of land acknowledgements help us remember and honor place, and remember and honor that we are earth beings, and that so much of the pain and injustices that we experience as humans actually started with the desecration and disconnection from land. So that, the Atlantic slave trade, colonization itself were about the exploitation of land. That Africans were enslaved in order to exploit land. And so reconnecting to land, and especially to indigenous ways of being in right relationship to land, is a really important place of healing and remembering our belonging. So I'll name that I am on the unceded territory of the Lenape peoples. And the Lenape peoples stewarded this land that's now called Brooklyn and New York City, as well as parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, pretty much the whole southern Hudson Valley of New York and parts of Delaware. The Lenape stewarded this land for thousands of years. And this was an amazing ecosystem of biodiversity, rich in flora and fauna, that this was really beautiful, not simply wild land, but really tended land and cared for land. And we can learn so much by coming back into conversation with indigenous ways of knowing, indigenous land keepers. And so if you know the indigenous peoples wherever you're situated today, feel free to put that in the chat. So you can name the tribes or the territories if you know them. And if you don't know them, you know, there are lots of apps and websites. There's one in particular, nativeland.ca, that is actually also an iPhone app or a phone app. I think it's also on, what's the other platform, not iPhone? What is it called? Someone help me. The other phones, Android, thank you, Paul. And it's a great way to start to reconnect, again, heal that disconnection from land. So I'm seeing a lot of beautiful names: Lenape, the Otom, Missouria, the Osage peoples, the Great Lakes tribes. Yeah, encourage everyone to explore this invitation for honoring native land and land acknowledgement. It's something we can do at any gathering. You can put them in the documents of organizations that you're a part of, and encourage young people to learn about it. One of my best friend is a high school teacher in Toronto, and they do a land acknowledgement every morning as part of the announcements. So every day you hear the land acknowledgement. So it's something that hopefully we'll start to learn to do here. So the second honoring that I like to begin with is an honoring of the Asian lineages of this practice. And this has become especially important to me in the past few years as I really consider kind of what gets left out as mindfulness particularly starts to grow in the dominant consciousness. You know, it can seem like it's only a practice that is concerned with neuroscience and evidence-based research, and we can really lose the connection with the fact that these are ancient wisdom traditions. And that might not be true for us as a group of people of color, might have more connection and more understanding of that ancient roots. But I think even for us, in the face of growing violence against Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Asian people really around the world, that it becomes even more important to acknowledge the lineages, especially because there are so few Asian American teachers in particular traditions, including the Insight tradition and other Western convert traditions. So this is something also that begins to heal some of the disconnection and creates that growing sense of belonging, where people are not erased and left out. And as the Taiwanese American scholar Funi Su says, even leaving out is a kind of cultural appropriation. And so when we don't name the lineages, we are really not in right relationship with these teachings. So I primarily teach in the Insight lineage or tradition, which comes from the Theravada tradition of Southeast Asia. And my teachers primarily come from the forest Thai tradition, or the Thai forest tradition, and primarily from the teachings of Ajahn Chah, who was a great Thai forest master. And so just paying deep respect and honor to my teachers and to their teacher, and the, as they say in Zen, warm hand to warm hand that pass these teachings down so that we can share in them today. And then the final honoring that I'd like to do before we settle into our sit is to our own ancestors. And this is another healing and remembering that I like to bring forward. That by honoring our ancestors, remembering our ancestors, we really acknowledge that we all come from somewhere and someplace, and often many places and many wheres. That all of us are here because our ancestors survived to some point. That although, yes, we have legacies of trauma and challenges, we also all have legacies of resilience and power. That all of our ancestors were touched by pandemics, all of them were touched by oppression, all of them were touched by colonization in some form. And they were also touched by beauty and joy and music and art and brilliance and power and truth and strength. And so just taking a moment as we settle into our practice to remember where we come from and to honor and have gratitude for that. Okay. So inviting you to find a comfortable position. We're going to sit for about 30 minutes. And sit is just a metaphor. I encourage you to find whatever position feels comfortable. So I do a lot of my practice lying down, and really invite you to find a way to position the body that feels really supportive in this moment. So letting go, particularly of any idea of how your posture should be. You know, we all have sort of these ideas of what meditation should look like, because primarily we see images of people who are super flexible or super, upright, and that doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So take a moment to find whatever feels supportive, really grounded and connected for you. And I'm just going to take a minute to close this window because it might help with the sound, because there's a lot of traffic outside tonight. Hold on. Yes, feel free to keep your camera on, or it's fine to turn your camera off. Be nice to see people during the conversation, but during the meditation, I really want you to feel relaxed, to feel comfortable, to really have a sense of release so that you can go inwards, connect with your body. And while again, you don't need to sit up straight in a particular way or have your body positioned to look a particular way, I do want to invite you to feel a sense of groundedness and a sense of openness. So if you are sitting, you'll see if you can have 3 points of contact with the ground, the floor. So you might want to put your feet flat on the floor. Make sure you feel that sense of groundedness in your seat. If you're lying down, really allow your body to release into the ground, into the earth. If you're standing, perhaps feel your feet flat and connected to the earth underneath you. So that we begin from that sense of groundedness, that truth that we are earthly beings, that we are part of this earth, we're not separate from it, that Gaia is one living system and we each play our role in their existence. So as you continue to really feel that sense of groundedness, feel that contact with the seat or the floor or the ground, really feeling every point of connection from one side of the foot to the other, from one part of the body to the other, wherever you feel that contact with the ground. At the same time, inviting a sense of openness in the front of the body. So you might want to roll your shoulders up and back or relax the belly. Knowing that you have a sense of safety here in the group, really allowing the front of the body to soften. And let's take a few deep breaths in and out, breathing in through the nose. You can release through the mouth. In, sighing out. A couple of more times on your own, really allowing yourself to breathe in and release any extra tension, anything that you don't need to hold on to. As you settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. And you can have your eyes open or closed, just relaxing the gaze, softening the eyes, softening the jaw, softening the other muscles of the face. As we settle into this practice of simply being here in this moment without any need of changing or fixing, of grasping or pushing away. Letting go of the doing of our day. And inviting the simple being of presence. And we'll do this by settling our awareness on the body. So we can place our attention anywhere we want. It's an amazing thing about human consciousness. We also often get lost in thoughts and stories and ideas, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what the mind does, especially if it's habituated that way. But in this practice, we're cultivating a capacity to actually rest our awareness where we want to. And the body is a great place to train that. The body is always in the present moment. So we had started with just noticing the contact with the earth. You can feel that again right now, just feeling the sensation of groundedness, of contact. We can also widen our awareness and just notice any sensations in the body. Wherever the body has sensations that you can be aware of, whether they're strong or subtle, just notice what you feel right now. Notice what's calling your awareness or your attention as you rested on the body. Not needing to make anything in particular happen, just allowing this natural capacity for awareness to show up when we call on it. And if you'd like to rest your awareness on breathing as one anchor or place to train your attention. So wherever you notice the breath entering and leaving the body as a felt sense, so not just thinking about the breath, but really feeling the breath, perhaps feeling the breath in the belly, rising and falling, or feeling the breath with the nostrils. Using this sensory experience, this felt sense, as a way to gather your awareness, gather your attention, begin to settle the body, settle the mind, the heart. And when the mind gets lost in thought, when we start telling stories or planning, evaluating, thinking about the past or the future, this is not a problem. It's not a mistake. It's not an invitation to get frustrated or upset with yourself. It is an invitation to return your awareness to the breath of the body. Noticing that you're lost is a moment of mindfulness. So you can even celebrate, oh, I'm lost in thought. Let me relax into the breath, feeling this in-breath from its very beginning to its end, feeling the exhale from its beginning to its end, really becoming intimate with the sensations of breathing, the sensations of the body. Practicing like this for a few minutes on your own. you'd like, you can use inquiries to help yourself settle. If the mind is busy, you can ask what's happening right now, really allowing yourself to feel the body, to notice sensation, to really rest your awareness in this felt sense of your experience. What's happening right now? Really being curious, intimate, connected. And a second inquiry, if you'd like, can I allow this? So if what's happening feels uncomfortable, agitating, difficult, or if you feel lost, drowsy, spacey, can you simply allow this? Really bring kindness, acceptance, compassion to whatever is here. If there is busyness or agitation, perhaps really allowing the exhale to bring some relaxation to the body. If there's sleepiness or drowsiness, allowing the inhale to bring some energy, vitality to the body. Allowing a deep inhale and exhale to be part of your process whenever you need to release or energize. Noticing any tendency to try and get somewhere else, to make something particular happen, some idea of what your practice should feel or be like. And seeing if you can release any grasping, craving around that, and simply release into this moment, this breath. Just allowing awareness to know whatever is here right now. In this practice, we are cultivating this capacity to know what's happening right now. And to be in right relationship to it. Can I allow this? To not be fighting or struggling with our experience, but to be available for an appropriate response. And it's a practice. So our lives keep us distracted and preoccupied. And so we come to this simple awareness as a way to cultivate this capacity to just be here in simplicity with this breath. And then this one. And we can start over in any moment, continuing to practice. So taking these last few minutes of practice in silence on your own. Just noticing what's here and allowing it. Thank you for your practice, everyone. Please feel free to stretch and move around. I want to point out that the bell that I'm using is a bell that Joshua gave me about 10 years ago. I think these belong to his mom. So very, very special. They're the only bells I use actually for practice here. So thank you, Joshua. So I want to share some thoughts, and again, leave plenty of time for conversation on this theme of the Dharma of belonging. Again, I love that title. I might steal that from Joshua. For me, belonging is something that has been kind of a source of challenge throughout my life. I'm an Ethiopian Eritrean American. I was born in Ethiopia, but I grew up in DC, and I grew up primarily in white neighborhoods. I went to mostly white schools through college, and always felt like I didn't belong in some way or another based on class, culture, race, other aspects of identity, and also just because I felt like a big weirdo. Like even people that were supposedly like me, I was really interested from an early age in esoteric things, and mindfulness was not the rage back then. Very few people I knew were meditating or going on retreats, and yeah, so belonging kind of became a central theme in my life. And one of the things that I've really had to come to terms with is the paradoxes of belonging. And I think it's because we all have to eventually come to terms with the paradoxes of life. And if we haven't figured that out by a certain age, good luck, because there are a lot of paradoxes. And to me, one of the central paradoxes about belonging and about just kind of the nature of reality is something in Buddhism that's called the paradox of the two truths, the absolute truth and the relative truth. And it's called the paradox of the two truths because both are true. There's an absolute truth that we are fundamentally interconnected. All ancient wisdom traditions point to this, that there is actually no separation. And also, modern science has figured that out, like caught up with indigenous wisdom to recognize, oh, we're not actually separate, distinct things. There's actually no smallest particle. The science now is considering that there's no smallest sub atom. It used to be thought that it was the atom that was the smallest, and then they realized no, there are smaller things. And now they think it's just kind of connection all the way down. One physicist I met, when I asked him to explain it to me, described it that we are all kind of a vibrating energy pattern, right? So that's the truth of quantum physics, of string theory, that we all originated 14 billion years ago from one tiny teensy pinpoint that's not even measurable. It's how many, I don't know how many zeros there are on it in its infinitesimally smallness. That we then differentiated into all of these things. So that's the absolute, that there's that interconnection. We're all stardust. We are fundamentally affecting each other, that, particles, atoms, molecules are all in relationship with each other. And that's why we have such a strong effect on each other energetically. When we feel vibes, that's what we're feeling. It's true. And we are distinct. We are individuals. We have identities, we have cultures, we have histories. There are consequences to the histories that we live in. So these two truths are both true. There's an absolute truth of interconnection, of non-separation. That's what Buddhism talks about. Interdependence, non-separation, oneness. And there's a truth that we are distinct individuals. We are 21 little squares here in different places. We've all had different histories, different lives. I like to say it as, and I say this a lot in the book, we are not separate and we are not the same. And both of those are true. And grappling with that paradox really is the work of our spiritual practice. It's the work of awakening. And it's the challenge of awakening too. Joshua mentioned I used to be the executive director at New York Insight. The New York Insight Meditation Center is, a large meditation center in New York City that was really striving at the time, and still is, to be a multicultural space, to really reflect New York City. Whereas a lot of other Buddhist and other kind of modern meditation spaces were very white. These convert Buddhist spaces are very, reflective of a dominant culture of the teachers who started them, who were mostly white, mostly had practiced in Asia, but came back and expressed these teachings the ways that they understood them, which was totally through their lenses and through their expression. New York Insight was really trying to not replicate that, trying to have different voices, have different expressions. And it was really difficult because there was a lot of pushback on that. There was this bypassing to, why do we need POC spaces? Or why do we need the Dharma expressed in this way? We've always expressed it in this way. And by always, they meant the last 30 years that they were expressing it. And there was a real dismissal of also the cultural aspects of the teachings. There was sort of a leaving out of devotional practices, of chanting, of ritual. There was a real secularization of the teachings. So sometimes we can kind of bypass to, we are not separate. We don't need to have all these different expressions. We don't need to have special spaces. We don't need to have an LGBTQI group. We don't need to have a POC group. That can be a clinging to the absolute truth. And there can also be a clinging to the relative truth. I noticed that in myself, that there can be a tendency to want to have all the things figured out about our issues, about our challenges, to kind of have all the injustices solved before I can rest in the truth of interconnection. That it's almost like I don't want to have to admit that the absolute is also true, because there's so much to do in the relative, there's so much to process in the relative, there's so much to alleviate in the relative. The work is never done. And so often I find people of color, people who work in social justice, people who are really on the front lines of social change work, that we can cling to the relative truth and deny ourselves some of the healing and the rest and respite that comes in the fact that we are not separate. It also means that we have to let down our defenses and make a connection with those who we disagree with and those who really challenge us. I heard recently for the first time this song that some of you might know already. It's a gospel classic by Shirley Caesar, and there's a rendition of it, cover by Resistance Revival Chorus. It's called This Joy. And the lyrics say, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me, and the world can't take it away. And the song goes through all of these things: joy, strength, love, pride, that the world didn't give those to me. Those are inside of me. They are the truth of that absolute interconnection. But I know for me, sometimes I feel like I can't feel joy until all of these other things in the world are taken care of. That my happiness and my joy depend on these outside circumstances changing. And, that's another paradox of practice, actually, is that we will continue to feel heartbreak or, grief and a deep sense of loss that we will have to mourn. And we still can have our joy. We can still experience freedom. There's this sense of, I was leading a group the other night for an Eritrean community. I'm half Eritrean, as I said. And there were a lot of young folks talking about feeling a sense of survivor's guilt or diaspora guilt. There's a war raging in the Horn of Africa right now on the border of Eritrea and Ethiopia. And there's a lot of grief for those of us who feel helpless, that we can't help, that there's nothing we can do. And so some of us, it's like we deny ourselves that sense of freedom and peace because of all the horrors. There's a sense of survivors or freedom guilt, that we kind of cling to the relative and all of the challenges that come in the relative, although the relative is not only challenges, it's also our brilliance and our uniqueness and our diversity. But we can cling to the challenges of the relative and not feel the truth of the absolute. So I'll just say a few more words and then really want to hear from all of you. But, for me, this practice, and by this practice, I don't only mean meditation. I mean, really the fullness of these teachings really have given me tools and ways of navigating these paradoxes. There's such a richness of teachings, so it's hard to kind of sum up all of what helps one grapple with the heaviness of this moment in time and the paradoxes in this moment. But I'll just offer two that I think his name is Edward Kanzi. He's a scholar, a Buddhist scholar. I think he's dead now, but he went through all the teachings and he identified the two teachings that are kind of the most repeated, the most recommended by the Buddha, purportedly, in the classical texts. And I thought they were really interesting. I thought they would be like mindfulness and maybe like the breath practice and impermanence, like things that we hear about a lot. But they were two practices that are very profound and kind of make sense. So the first one is called Maranasati. And sati is the word that we translated as mindfulness. So it means awareness, remembering. And Maranasati is the remembering or recollection of death. And it's a formal practice. It's part of the mindfulness practices. So just like mindfulness of breath, there are mindfulness of the four elements. There are mindfulness of emotions, mindfulness of thoughts. We can be mindful of anything. And so this is a practice that encourages us to be mindful of death, the fact that we all die. And it's a very intense practice in the classical teachings. It's actually encourages people to go to charnel grounds where bodies are being burned. And so sometimes here people go to cemeteries to practice it, but we don't have to do that. We can right now, especially just open the newspaper every day, right? Or see the changes around us in our communities and also witness the deaths that are, broadcast at us, especially being part of POC and particularly Black communities. And it's a practice that kind of, I think, challenges the way death is almost used as like a weapon towards us now. It can re-traumatize us because of the way that it's used in terms of its shock value. But this practice actually allows us to connect to death as just a natural part of life. And everything in this culture goes against that, right? This is a culture of like youth forever. Nobody's supposed to age. Nobody's ever supposed to get old. And when they get old, we like send them away somewhere else so we don't have to look at them anymore. and into nursing homes, or, they disappear from popular media and culture, and youth is glorified as the only thing. And so death meditation actually allows us to kind of reclaim the truth that life is impermanent, and that is not something to deny or reject, but it actually, admitting that, allows us to enjoy and have gratitude for life. It's kind of like a switcheroo practice, is when I acknowledge, and one of the recollections we do every day is that I am of the nature to grow old, I'm the nature to get ill, I'm the nature to die. This is, nobody gets out of that. The one thing every single human being has in common is that we will die. We will all have radically different experiences, but all of us will die. And so it becomes a way to really reclaim this truth as one, not something we should fear, but something that we can really start to have a reclamation of. So Maranasati, mindfulness of death. And the second one is metta, METTA, which is loving kindness meditation. Some people talk about it as friendliness. I like to think of it as the heart that cares. That this is a practice that we can bring to anything. And actually, it is always co-arises with mindfulness. So when we are truly mindful, when we really bring our awareness to something, it is a natural response that the caring heart will open. And that's a lot of what we're cultivating, actually. So those questions, what's happening right now with curiosity, that's the mindfulness. Can I allow it? That's the caring heart. That's the metta. So it's interesting to me, these two practices are the most recommended practices. They're the ones that really can benefit us in any moment, in any situation. To recognize that life is impermanent and that we only have a limited amount of time here. And this joy, the world didn't give it and it can't take it away. So these limited breath that we have in this life, what will we do with it? And this practice of care, friendliness, to bring that kindness into this limited time we have here. And that's the opportunity. So those are just some brief thoughts I wanted to share with you. And I just want to open it up now for conversation, for your insights, for any comments you have or any questions you have. And just feel free to unmute yourselves. And, I have faith in us that we'll work it out as a group.
Hi, Sabine. Is that how you pronounce your name? Sabine?
It's Sebene. And how do I pronounce your name?
Sebene. Okay. Tiara, like the crown.
Tiara. Nice to meet you, Tiara.
Yeah. Nice to meet you too. So I just have a question because I just recently transitioned about a year and a half, 2 years ago into my calling for healing. So I just wanted to know, how did you know that you had a calling to go on the path of healing, and how did you make a transition if you were in another field?
Oh my goodness, Tiara, that's such a good question. And congratulations to you. Can I ask what kind of healing you're doing?
Working with the chakras and
Okay.
yoga. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, I had no plan. in the sense that it still surprises me that I do this full time, not because I don't think I should be or didn't want to, but I don't feel like I had like a clear path set out. I didn't know what I would be doing, and it just kind of unfolded in front of me. And having said that, it sounds like it was kind of just magical, which it was in some ways, but I was always kind of supporting myself in different ways until now. Now I'm a full-time teacher and writer. But even until 5 years ago, I was doing various things. So I worked for about 20 years in social justice and social change work, mostly working with children and youth, both in New York and San Francisco, and also internationally. I worked in refugee camps.
Sorry, I got kicked out.
Oh, okay.
But I rejoined.
Yeah. So I was saying that I worked for about 20 years in nonprofit, mostly with children and youth. And I was always practicing on the side and volunteering. So I was a volunteer at New York Insight for many years before I started working there part-time. And then I started working there full-time. And then I became the executive director. And then I started teaching while I was working there. And then I started, teaching a little bit more, but also grant writing and doing consulting work on the side. So it was always kind of, in places of transition. And even now, I don't know, where transition will take me. I really love what I'm doing now, but I imagine I won't be doing exactly this forever because I continue to change and evolve. One thing that I often ask myself and has been a really guiding force for me is if I didn't have to worry about anything, if I didn't have to worry about resources, if I didn't have to worry about the opinions of my family, if I didn't have to worry about, what I felt other people think I should be doing, what would I be doing? And I ask myself that question a couple of times a year, just to get in alignment with what my true aspirations are. And that doesn't mean that I'm doing them, I have to say, but it didn't mean that I was always doing them. But I had that as kind of, as my steering, like my guiding star in a way. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's kind
No, I can completely agree with what you're saying, because I used to work at nonprofit when I used to live in Chicago, and it was for helping kids, and I was in accounting, and it wasn't a field that I was fulfilled in as far as accounting, but I did love helping people. So that was one of the questions that I asked myself, like, what would I be doing? Like if I didn't have to worry about money, like what is something that I actually enjoyed doing? And it just came to me, like, it was just helping people. And I didn't know exactly how I would help them, but it was just something that called to me that said, okay, like, you like to help people. Like growing up, I used to like playing nurse to my family members and, helping them when they were sick. And it was just something that just came natural to me. So, so I just followed that and just asked myself that question, like, okay, what is it that you really want to do? Or like, how can you help other people?
Yeah.
I completely agree. I understand.
Such an important question. And another thing that I've really didn't come into my consciousness until about 5 years ago is just because you're good at something, it doesn't mean you're supposed to do it. And there can be a real
sometimes it could be when you're
there can
things
be
you're bad at.
Sometimes there's a real satisfaction from being good at something and getting, positive feedback and support, but you have to go a little deeper to understand what's your true calling and what's your true purpose. And you might not be very good at that yet.
It's something that you're called here to work on.
Yes,
pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Tiara.
Thanks.
Hi, I had a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, Sebene. I used to sit at New York Insight so long ago, probably while you were still there. So it's nice to see you again. I love your book, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So during this period of the pandemic, I have been realizing that joy is closer to my natural state. And that's something that you had mentioned a couple of times. And I was just wondering, I've been really struggling to keep my heart open, especially, with everything that's happening in the news and, in this country and a lot, like all of this turmoil. And I find myself, just like internalizing this anger and this rage that I have, and then finding it really difficult to engage with some people, because I'm just so frustrated. And I'm just wondering if you had any words of wisdom on, the best way to, incite joy and just, keep the heart open even during this time.
Yeah, that's a really real question. Is it Karina?
Karine.
Karine, okay. Thank you, Karine. Yeah, a couple of things. I've been wondering about this idea of keeping the heart open because, the heart like pumps. It's not always open. And I've been really working with this idea of the heart that cares. And so, yeah, I'm cultivating a heart that is available to care, but it doesn't mean that I keep it open for everything, especially right now. And, joy is a tricky one because I like, I started in a Zen tradition and my teacher's teacher, Charlotte Joko Beck, she said, joy is whatever is happening minus our opinion of it. And she made a distinction between joy and happiness. She said, happiness has an opposite, unhappiness. So we can have happiness or unhappiness. We can like things or dislike things. And that's different than joy. Joy is more, it's not like, she's not speaking of joy in this exuberant sense. She's speaking of joy more in the kind of way I've been talking about it as like related to freedom and related to not needing things to be a certain way for me to be okay. And so for me, joy can also include heartbreak, and joy can also include rage, because it really is this capacity to allow for all of life's experience. And it's a little bit different than the joy that is sold to us, through capitalism and through consumer culture. So that's one part of it for me, is sort of the heart that cares, but is also capable of boundaries, and a joy that allows for all of experience, doesn't have to be happy all the time. And then the other thing is like boundaries. Like, I am super, super boundaried around social media, news, people who just really can't get out of toxic loops. The bad news culture, because there's no good news like reported pretty much. And really just that's on me to kind of mitigate, how many articles do I need to read to be informed about something? And what action do I want to take if I feel moved to? So I pretty much know what's going on in India now. I've read multiple articles. I've read some scientific articles. I've read some news articles. Reading more articles about what's happening right now there is not going to help India. So do I want to take action? Do I want to reach out to friends who might be part of networks of reliable ways that I can support or participate? Do I want to do practices and rituals offering my energies and support? But like reading the next disaster article is probably not going to be part of that plan for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, oh, is someone else talking? I can't see.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say thank you. Thank you for tonight. And I actually got to sit in on the live through the MMTCP program on Friday. So thank you. I'm like halfway through your book. I just, Joshua, thank you for tonight. And I'm here to listen and thank you.
Oh, great. Is it Shea?
It's Shay.
Shay. And are you in the MMTCP program?
I am.
Oh,
I
great.
am.
Cool.
Yeah.
Who's your mentor?
Joshua.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, it was interesting, and I won't take up too much time, but I was telling Joshua, I was looking for, a female mentor, and the universe was like, we have another plan. And I saw that he was in Chicago, which is where I do a lot of my work. And I'm just grateful to be here.
Great. Nice to meet you, Shay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So for
thank
those of
you.
you who don't know, MMTCP is the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Training Program, certificate program, certification program, something like that. And it's a 2-year program, and it's really fabulous, actually. It's a really immersive and very powerful program. So Shay will be a teacher at the end of it.
Hi, Sebene.
Hi, Mayumi.
Yes, I'm Mayumi. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Joshua, for the invitation. I have a practice mainly of Zen Buddhism or Zen meditation for over 20 years. And a couple of years ago, I came to conclusion I was clinging to my teacher, and because I really loved the small Sangha, and I stepped out of it, and I really detached myself from my idea of she had to be my teacher. That also had to do with my involvement with New York Insight POC group and other BIPOC, now the BIPOC groups. And now I end up practicing them with another place. But, it's, Zen is a little bit too macho sometimes. Like there are so many things you have to. And I really loved your approach of resting practice. And I have a lot of physical conditions. So just opening up what are really the practice of helps me. And the question I wanted to ask here is, in your practice and the development of practice, how important were you and how did you decide who your main teacher is? Like, how does that develop, or what is your take on, like now we have so many options to communicate with different teachers, right? And but I think it's quite important. It's not because I believe in that Tibetan thing of one dedicated teacher to devote and do everything, but I'm quite confused yet, and I'm looking for a BIPOC teacher, hopefully some kind of multicultural experience. I'm an immigrant here, and I've lived in a couple of countries. So that's my question.
Yeah, great question, Mayumi. This is going to end up being a theme. You guys will tell. I had no clear plan about teachers or teachings. I was really just kind of following intuitively, and so I've had not a huge number, but a few main teachers over the years. Again, I started in a Zen tradition, and then I've been in the insight world for probably 17, 18 years now of my practice. So maybe the first 10 years in Zen. And it's really been an intuitive process for me of meeting people who I really resonated with and practicing with them and studying them for a while, and then asking to study more deeply with them. And right now I don't have a teacher. I don't have one teacher that I consider my teacher. I have a lot of teacher friends, I have a really wonderful group of peers, and some of those used to be my teachers. And I really see us as kind of like what Thich Nhat Hanh says, the next Buddha is Sangha. And really, I'm cultivating the teacher within as my main practice. So that's me. And then, I think that there's a challenge now with, like you're saying, there's so many offerings and there's so many teachers and so many teachings. And sometimes I like to think of it as like trailheads. If you go hiking, there could be many trailheads, so many beginnings of a trail. And all of those trails take you into the woods. And eventually those trails meet up. And so I think of the different teachers and different lineages and different practices as trailheads. And the problem I see is that some people never leave the trailheads. They're kind of just jumping from one practice community to another and never getting on the trail. And this is a terrible metaphor because we're not trying to go anywhere. So, forget that. But if we stay with this metaphor, all those trails will meet. But if we don't really stick with a particular practice, with a particular community, or with a particular lineage, or a particular teacher, let's say, we're never going to see that those trails meet. We're just going to be like dilly-dallying, smorgasbording, like taking a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and not really deepening our roots. Now I know I'm mixing metaphors, but if we don't deepen our roots, like anything can blow us away. We're just sort of like dipping our roots over here, dipping our roots over there. We never really deepen. So, yeah, for me, it's been important to stick with one teacher or teachers in a particular lineage for a time so that I can realize that all of this goes to the same truth ultimately.
So I was dedicated to the same teacher about 20 years.
Yeah,
but it was like a bad relationship. She's great and her teaching is great, but it wasn't for me. And I knew that it's like a great man I would want to be with. And I was with my teacher. After 5, maybe 10 years, it was quite clear I should be seeking something else. But I kept telling myself, oh, but I'm a meditator and, accept what's not good about her and just follow what I see good in her that could teach me. And I kept insisting until I finally broke it off from myself and in 20 years. So I have a little trauma, but I think I could take another trail and be brave.
And ultimately these trails lead us to ourselves, right? I'm not sure if I believe in having one teacher for ever, or even for too long. I think it's an ancient model that served its purpose and its time. I'm not sure if that's where we're at anymore. And this is my opinion. Different things work for different people. And it's obviously just my experience, but then we get stuck on that part of the trail. We never actually come to where those trails meet. And where they meet takes us into all sorts of experiences that isn't just about one particular practice or one particular way of doing things. And I know that's very counter Zen, so I'm being a Zen heretic here, but yeah, thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to say hello. Unfortunately, I missed all of the lecture. So, but I want to first thank everyone who's participating because you guys have asked some very poignant and very important questions that actually have kind of helped to kind of catapult me into the conversation and to hear some of the gems, especially like the idea of joy, and really unwrapping that store-bought version, that Target version of joy is everything, Pixar networks type of thing. So, and a lot of what I'm hearing is kind of confirmation on kind of the path that I'm on. And I'm really focusing on trying to just listen to spirit and just be guided, and acknowledge. So I've always told myself, happiness is a choice. So you can look at things and be happy. But so now I'm really overstanding that, and I'm realizing that I'm embracing the joy, because sometimes people will look at me and it's like, I just see things for what they are and appreciate them for what they are, So a lot of times I say, I give thanks for the things that I have and for what I don't have. So it's like, even though things are not on the outside looking very sunshiny and, it just is what it is. A thunderstorm does not look pretty all the time if you're inside of it, but you just have to acknowledge it and embrace it and find some type of benefit from it. So I definitely appreciate you leveling me up in terms of understanding that, as well as just confirming, my path. I have a quick story.
Oh, you muted, Robert.
I'm sorry. Somebody was calling me, but I'm at the point now where I'm trying to really find out what direction I'm going in terms of the healing practices and things of that nature. I'm good at what I do, and it's innate, but I think I subconsciously chose that because it speaks to my purpose. And so now I'm trying to separate that and really figure out what my actual purpose is. But thank you. I appreciate the energy and the great questions, everyone.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, they are great questions. It's been really rich conversation. I appreciate you sharing and stepping in, even if you missed part of it. I like that energy. So maybe we have time for one more sharing. If anyone has something they want to speak or say or ask before we close. Carlotta?
Hi, yes. Hi, Sebene. I enjoyed your talk at the presentation last Friday with the CPT, something like that. I don't have the acronym down. But I just want to thank you. And Josh, thank you for inviting us today. I just got the email, so I can't miss this because I wanted to hear more of your talk. But I like that you didn't have a plan, but you're following your intuitive intelligence. And I believe all of us are guided through our spirits if we're rooted and connected to our ancestors. It's just a matter of, for me, connecting with like minds that validate that the journey you're on is the one you're supposed to be on. And it's great to be part of this group with the BIPOC, because so many times I've been in groups where I'm the only person of color. And you're just like, I wonder if everybody's getting what I'm trying to say. So I like that we have this common place for connection. And that ultimately, I think there's commonalities from ancient to ancient. And because of their power and we're listening and our hearts are open, we can be on that journey and we're on the right path. And I feel real good that I'm on the right path now. So thank you very much. And I look forward to reading your book. That's thank you in my language.
Oh, thank you, Carlotta. Yeah, it's a beautiful place to end. There's a very famous teaching from the Buddha Dharma. The story is that the Buddha's cousin asked him if spiritual friendship was half of the holy life. And I love the response as it's recorded, because the Buddha he didn't just say no, he said, no, don't say that, Ananda. Spiritual friendship is not half of the holy life, it's the whole of holy life. And there's such a profound power in that, to say that community really is everything. So again, the response earlier that the next Buddha is Sangha, the next awakened being will be all of us, will be community. And so really encouraging you to stay connected and to support each other, and to thank Joshua for cultivating community and connection and inviting me in. And just ending with a quick dedication of merit, just to offer that when we come together like this, whether it's on Zoom or in person, like, we're creating goodness in the world. We've all spoken beautiful truths tonight, and we've practiced together, and that creates that energy field that we were talking about earlier. It beautifies it, it purifies it, and that creates what's called merit. And so we dedicate merit. We recognize it, we acknowledge it for what it is, and then we offer it up so that it's not just for us, but it's for the benefit of all beings everywhere without exception. So taking a moment just to honor our merit, to really respect it, to enjoy it, and to wish that it brings freedom and joy and belonging to all beings. May all beings be free. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you so much, Sebene. That was so beautiful. Gosh, what a blessing. I love your teachings as always, and I love the community engagement. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
good night.
Read the book. Read the book.
Thank you.
Please read the book.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, y'all.